everyone. I'm Leslie Cornwell with Midwifery Business Consultation, and I have with me Hilary Schlinger, and she is an amazing midwife that I've gotten the privilege to know over the last few months. We were just brainstorming, and it was kind of a funny coincidence. I came in today with the topic thinking, okay, there's a lot of stress in our environment nowadays with COVID and trying to be moms and midwives and all these roles. And then you had the coincidental same thought talking to someone recently that we need to talk about, like, they're trying to be students, midwifery students in this crazy world, and they're seeing good examples of midwives and not so good examples of midwives. So yeah,
exactly.
Self-care and the importance would be huge. So Hilary, take it away.
Well, that was exactly it, is how do you set boundaries? How do you take care of yourself as a midwife? And it's something that I've been asked over time, sometimes with amazement that I've been doing this for almost 40 years, is how do you stay in midwifery without burning out? There are so many people who do. And I think you and I in our conversation were talking, some of it is how you structure your practice. Do you allow for a rotating call schedule if there are other people who you work with? Do you set it out that you have time off? And if you're in a solo practice, do you have others who provide backup for you, versus do you set a particular time every year where you do not take clients and you put down your cell phone, your pager, you walk away, and maybe there's somebody who will take emergency calls for you, but you can absolutely not disengage from the practice. So it's really important.
Well, and I think just the mental health side, if you don't have these good collaborations and backup plans in this foundation of your business, you could have one lady in labor and you have so much more anxiety at that birth. What if somebody else is going to call me? Please. I mean, if you had these proactive plans in place and structures, you're going to decrease a lot of it. Like the boundaries we talked about briefly, just like setting the ladies at the beginning, what to call about, what's normal, what's not normal, and boundaries of, okay, this is a non-urgent thing. You want to reschedule your appointment, probably 10 o'clock at night. Let's talk about it tomorrow morning. Like, when is the urgent time to talk, 7 at night to 8 in the morning, and when is non-urgent? What does that look like? Those structures are important.
Gosh, you touched on so many things, you know, when you said about somebody in labor. I once had 3 people who had their babies within a 36-hour period of time who all lived in different directions. And if I didn't have other people to call, I made it to every one of those births. Yeah. But I had the first person had her baby here, which is my small birth center. And then I had someone I could leave her postpartum with to go to the second person's house. And I had somebody else sitting with the third person who was in labor. So I could make it to all 3 births because there were all of those backup considerations.
Well, you made me just think of a story too, Hilary. With my practice, we had myself and another nurse midwife and a student at the time, and we had a birth center and home birth practice. So both birth rooms were delivered within an hour and a half of each other. Then a lady was precepting at home, and it was just pure craziness. And I was thinking, because I was the admin mostly, I was the coordinating. I was so grateful I knew midwives in this area I could call and were so reliable, and I didn't care what I was paying them because I knew it was the value. So I knew that we were in good hands, but for those ups and downs, and it's such a fragile system. If you don't have a team approach, you're just going to go off the deep end and unsafe things are going to happen.
Well, and the other one is that I know people who have said at the outset, and folks need to know this, is I'm one person. I can't be 2 places at once. And if you're a home birth client and I have somebody else in labor at the same time, I might ask both of you to come here. And so that's another way that people who try to do both birth center and home birth do that, and to say it up front so they're not disappointed if their home birth turns into a birth center birth, because they each live half an hour in opposite directions.
Yeah.
which
There's just
certainly
boundaries
can
of,
happen.
and there's boundaries of thinking, okay, I am human, reminding them we are midwives. They have this like
Right.
angelic approach to what a midwife is supposed to be. And I'm like, I'm a mom. My phone might die. I might be in a no service area. And there's backup plans. That's why it has, this is my first number, but if you can't get a hold of me in 30 minutes, this is the next plan. Like clear
Yeah.
expectations that you are a human being too.
Most definitely. And, you know, you and I had talked about this in terms of practice, and I said to you, the first one to me is the internal. Being able to set, I think of them as emotional boundaries, and looking at why we went into midwifery to start with. And often it's we want to take care of people and we want to bring them the message of midwifery and we want them to have beautiful births. And they're not our best friend. And oftentimes, especially folks who've never had a care provider who came to them with that midwifery philosophy of I'm here to be an educator and a facilitator of decisions and to not tell you what to do, but to be a partner in shared decision making. It totally changes their view of what a care provider is. And then they end up becoming really attached to you, which then extends to thinking that they're in your social circle. And so for me, where before the era of social media, a lot of it was saying, I had to set a boundary that I wasn't going to socialize with people who are my clients, that I wasn't going to go to their baby shower, to their christening, in Judaism to their bris, that I was their care provider. And by setting those boundaries, it helped me internally to be able to stay in the role of midwife and not friend to the world. In the era of social media, I think there's the whole other thing of everyone wants to friend you on Facebook. Well, I don't need the people who are my clients to have access to all of my family and friends and politics and all the other opinions that I might say to my cousin or my sister. So I've made the decision that I'm not going to friend people on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And other people may decide differently.
Yeah.
But for me, that was a good boundary setting.
Well, and I think each midwife has to make their own boundary. Like you have to be able to say, I'm okay with, they have your cell phone number, but like some people will do an office out of their house and some people are like, no, I don't want them to know where I live. I mean, there's a reason you make an LLC. There's a reason you get an office. You don't want your clients. I mean, the stories I can tell from the Amish, when I first moved into my house, they're like, oh, a midwife moved in the area and I like had deliveries in my driveway, like with people I'd never met before. And there's a reason you want to have boundaries and go, I mean, they're fun stories later, but not funny stories. But you have to, otherwise you get absorbed by midwifery. You don't have any other identity. And I know you and I talked about it in 2017. I went down that dark path. I only became an identity of a midwife. I started losing being a wife and a mother and myself. And I'm like, I want to have midwife part of me, not me. And so I had to readjust.
Exactly.
And it was hard to do when you know there's a need there.
I have had an office in my house, but what I did is I took what was a 2-car garage and I turned it into a separate entrance 500 square foot office. Mm-hmm. And I lost my garage, but I gained an office with a hardcore door, one of those solid core doors. And when that door closed, that's where I was in my office. So it wasn't so much about people knowing where I live, but it was about being able to have a separate space from my family. And when I walked through the door the other way, I was back in my home. So there are different ways that people can run it. And I would say in New Mexico, that's more of a tradition that people would have a birthing room or birthing what we might now call a small birthing center, but I think it depends. It depends where you live as well. And
Yeah, the
there's
birth space, how much you want it to be in your backyard,
yeah,
literally.
exactly. But again, back to boundaries. Now, my mind is going on to midwifery history, and somebody had just posted in the ACNM town hall about Jesusita Aragon, who was known as La Partera, which means the midwife, and she was in Las Vegas, New Mexico, which is nothing like Las Vegas, Nevada, and she caught babies until she was almost 100 years old. And I mean, I think that a quarter of the town was born into her hands.
You need to get me that link and we'll put it at the bottom so people can read about it. I would love to learn more about that.
There's a book that was published many years ago called La Partera, which means the midwife in Spanish. So I love learning about the history and history of midwifery in different parts of our country. So I had posted it recently about the book on the ACNM Town Hall thread.
Okay, I will have to look.
So back to taking care of yourself, and that has to do with health. I know of so many midwives that they go to births and they don't think about eating when they're there, or the woman's pushing for 2 hours and they don't pee the whole time, and they end up with a bladder infection. You know, you have to know that it's okay to go to the bathroom. It's okay to go eat something yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Self-care, because otherwise you're not going to be able to be there for the next woman, let alone for 10 years down the line.
Yeah,
so
we sacrifice so much. I think it's just our generation in general just is like, give, and I'll rest later, but then the later never comes. And yeah, you have to exercise, you have to eat, drink water. Like, we don't look very good when we're trying to tell to our woman, you need to eat well, and
exactly.
we don't look very different than she does. It's hard. I mean, there's challenges in our society, but if you don't have the endurance, I've talked to so many midwives, and there's a very clear path. There's ones that give their heart and soul to everything, and then they're last on the list. And then there's other midwives that can handle the thicks and thins of the stress of their business, the ups and downs of the births, because they get massages, they get personal, they invest in themselves. They make a budget for the business to invest. They're first, and then because they're first, everything else goes better. And so it's a mind shift. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, you know, and you talked about relationship and kids, and gosh, I know that I've had conversations with people who talk about the divorce rate among midwives. And yes, there are times when you are going to walk out on your kid's birthday party. My daughter is 30 and she still remembers. She swears that I left her in front of the elementary school when she was in 2nd grade. I know I called somebody to go pick her up, but that's a whole nother level of having to coordinate if you have kids.
Yeah.
But also to be able to turn off the phone and have some other way that your clients can get hold of you in an emergency, but have a date night with your spouse. I know some people use the feature on their phones, I know iPhones have it, I'm not sure about Androids, where if somebody calls you from the same number twice in a row, it overrides your do not call. And so you tell your clients that. If you're in labor or this is an emergency, then you can call twice. But if not, that you turn it off.
Just finding another partner in the area, not just covering birth calls, say, hey, so you can have date night, you can have one night a week of 4 hours, no responsibilities. It's you time, it's family time, and I'll trade it off with you. I mean, I talk to a lot of moms that are like, oh, I don't get a break for my kids. I'm like, trade daycare time, trade one day a week. Like, you could do that as a midwife, trade call coverage time.
Exactly. And we all need that. And it doesn't make you less of a midwife because you're taking care of yourself. As a matter of fact, as you said, you're modeling it for your clients of what does it mean to be healthy, and that's emotionally healthy as well as physically healthy.
Well, and the students we have, I mean, I am not perfect by far, but like we want another great generation. The average burnout is about 7 years, the last statistic I read. And we want great midwives. And if we're teaching them this crazy life and either they get afraid and they're like, I'm not going to be a midwife, or that's what they do because that's all they see. We have to break this wheel somehow.
Well, and the other one that I would say for nurse midwives in particular is that I see a lot of them who say, I'm not going to go into birth center or home birth practice because of it. And so they take hospital jobs because of the regularity of hours, even if their heart is really in doing community birth. And so I think us being able to model that there is a sane way to have a birth center. There is a sane way to have a home birth practice. You don't have to give up on having yourself, free time, your kids, etc., should you choose to move outside of hospital practice.
Yeah. I think there's just a lot of myths and misunderstandings of what a midwife is or what a midwife can be. And it varies greatly. There's different personalities, there's different styles, but we're human beings. I mean, we were talking briefly, Madeline Murray from Believe in Midwifery. I love her to pieces. She has so many studies about this constant adrenaline that's going through our bodies, the effects on it chronically. If you do not get your body a break from this constant adrenaline anxiety of the birth and being up at night, you've got to take vacations. You've got to take 1 or 2 days a week and rotate call and completely turn off and not be responsible for anything, because you'll burn out as a human being, you'll burn out as a midwife.
And back to the student who I was talking to today, and we were talking about one of the midwives in her practice, and sometimes there's a fear of, I don't have enough clients money-wise. And I told her the story of when I had a daughter who was quite ill and came home from college to live with me again while she recovered. And during that period of time, I chose not to take births and instead to focus on the GYN aspect of my practice. And I actually told my tax preparer that I wasn't going to make as much money this year because I'm not taking births. And then it turns out I made more money that year just doing GYN because the person whose birth you were at brings their teenage daughter for their first visit, and somebody liked the contraceptive care you were doing, and word got around, and they bring their neighbor. So knowing that sometimes taking a total birth break can also be useful. And I know you've been doing midwifery business consulting, is sometimes looking at how do I put what I know into action in other arenas. I was also going through menopause myself at the same time. And so I started seeing a lot of perimenopausal women for consultations, and it was a great area to go into.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's letting midwives know creatively. I just did a couple consults earlier today. They felt guilty as midwives because they were like, I don't want to do home births anymore. I love XYZ. I love mental health. I love lactation. I love this piece of midwifery. And there was so much guilt I had to get through them. I'm like, what's the definition of midwife? With woman. It doesn't mean catching a baby. It means you're supporting women in whatever aspect of their life they're in right now. And and that's what's hard. I think so much of our midwives, we beat ourselves up if we don't meet this expectation of what a midwife should be.
Yeah. And there is a transition period as well. And so I have to acknowledge that if you move out of doing birth, there is a grieving period, because for most of us, it's what pulled us in the first place. Yeah. And there's a coming to terms with, and it's okay that you are serving that midwife part of you just in a different way. Yeah. I certainly have found it in midwifery education, and now I know that I'm midwifing the next generation of midwives as well.
You just have a phenomenal, unique skill. We need amazing educational systems for midwives. We need amazing people that can help with the business foundation. These are all things supporting midwifery that can support the families you're caring for. So it's getting past that ancillary skills of maybe you don't want to do as many births, but what else can you do with your skill set, with your business to help with that?
So the last thing about self-care, I was talking with my son who loves rock climbing, and that's what he does. And he was talking about how it takes him away from all of his mind running all the time about whatever, because he has to concentrate so much on rock climbing. For myself, I do ceramics. I have a pottery wheel and a kiln, and it's so hands in them. It's like adult playing with mud pies. But finding those things that turn off our brains, because so many midwives, I know their brain is going all the time, right? And being able to also remember within that you might be a partner or a spouse, you might be a mother, you might be a midwife. And all of those things are things that you have to pay attention to others with, but then you also have to find the thing that takes care of you. Yeah. It's just like we tell new mothers, you can get lost in taking care of your baby and then taking care of your partner, and you have to make a little bit of time for yourself as well.
Well, and I learned just through the professional development side the last few years, just the miracle morning, and everybody gets 24 hours in a day, but how come some people can get so much more done in a day than other people? And there was classic links. They spent the first half hour taking care of themselves. They consistently do vacations. They consistently have boundaries because your memory is better. Your endurance. There's so much. People think, oh my gosh, I don't have time to do this for 20 minutes. Like meditation and all these powerful things. You're gonna not spend an hour trying to memorize and study something for a test. You're gonna take 10, 15 minutes. You're getting yourself more time back in the day if you look at it differently. You can't be a great person to take care of others and accelerate that success until you can take care of yourself. That's what I used to have, that guilt of like, okay, the mama guilt, the me guilt. And now it's like, I'm doing a disservice to my family by me not taking care of myself. I'm not being as good of a mom. I'm shorter with them. I'm angrier, and that's not right. So I am going to take care of me.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we've come full circle, right? We started out talking.
Yeah, I know you and I think this, with this year, there's just so many women of all walks of life, whether it's our clients needing extra things, our midwives, I mean, with schools being in and out and the internet and trying to be adaptable, this year has tested our whole country, let alone our midwives. And so
it certainly has. And everybody's learned both the pros and the cons of doing things over Zoom. So whether it's schooling or it's figuring out that some of those the prenatal schedule that we could, or even postpartum that we could check in, whether FaceTime, Skype, or Zoom, that, there's been different schedules that have come out on what's essential to really put your hands on somebody versus when can we do a check-in virtually. And I think on the business end that there's going to be a lot of changes going on for reimbursement for telemedicine and for virtual visits. Yeah. So there's so many different directions that our conversations could go.
Yeah, I'm excited for more of them. We're going to leave a teaser for everybody. Maybe we can have people put in the groups when we do our next talk in 6 weeks what they want. But yeah, I love talking to you as always, Hilary, and you get back to your family, and I appreciate your precious time tonight.
Oh, it was really nice to chat with you. Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.